But I prepare a first question. I always prepare one question to get the thing going.
Icebreaker. All right.
Yeah. So we kind of jump into, and I'm going to shift the question I prepared because there's an obvious question that just pops up to me as a place to start.
Yeah.
What's in your background there? Tell us what's in the background. What's
Well, it actually kind of leads to my teaching. I do a lot of online presentations nowadays, and I do a lot of teaching, and I'm technical teaching. And one of the ones I was doing it for, I was supposed to go this last year to India as well as Australia. It's a big conference called Global International Developers Conference.
Mm-hmm.
And we're all excited. A lot of my friends were all excited about going. This is the annual thing that they do, and they recently branched into Australia. So we had to do it online this year. So I had to make sure that I had some kind of appropriate background for the India audience. This is the I think Sun City in somewhere in India.
Okay.
Best I can do the geographical location of it. Not the White House. This has another whole context to it.
Yeah.
So, but I just like the dark background to keep it calm and serene. So.
I got it. No, it had. I mean, obviously, I'm from India, and it had a look of either like a Sikh or possibly a Mughal era Muslim sort of structure. Yeah. So where do you tend to go in India when you go to teach? What's the?
Well, I didn't go.
Oh, so this is your first time?
I went about 20 years ago for a wedding. My wife's colleague got married there, so we went and enjoyed the wedding there, and it was fun, but it didn't make sense. I was really excited about going back. So
right.
Getting there yet.
So I want to kind of ease into the teaching thing. We share that in common. It's in general the topic of the broader conversation today. But tell me about traveling. So you do a lot of traveling for the educational work.
Yes, obviously it's changed a lot. That's a whole other conversation there with what's going on this year. But the last probably 5 years, I got started with teaching because I started going to a conference. And it wasn't a normal, go to Las Vegas and see the latest gadget show conference, or it wasn't go to Java One, which is these big, tech shows and Java and language shows. It was a small show that grew organically over the years. Right there at District, we've done a couple meetups with the Connecticut Java Users Group,
right?
And we've done a couple presentations there. So this group that I'm with, called No Fluff Just Stuff, travels around the country and kind of taps into the Java users groups, as well as other local technical groups that are in hotspots around the country. But not spots like New York City or Las Vegas or Los Angeles or San Francisco. It's more Madison, Wisconsin, Reston, Virginia, Austin, Texas, Boston, of course, Indianapolis, Kansas City, Minneapolis, Minnesota, a couple others, Denver. We do one in Clearwater, Florida.
Okay.
Great shows. Yeah. So those were done. I was going to the one up in Boston for many years, and actually got pretty friendly with a lot of the speakers because they're really interesting. They're really interesting. I was learning a lot from them, not only their talks, but after hours, having a beer with them at the bar and hanging out and having dinner with some of them. And I started getting to know them, and I really liked what they were all about teaching, about sharing what they knew. Many of them were working for companies, and they were doing this on the weekends. These are extended weekends. So I started doing that like 5 years ago, only 10 years ago, but then more like 4 years ago, I started presenting, and I got to know, how things happen a lot in our industry, and is you have mentors, people who take a liking to you, take you under their wing. And I had a particular mentor there that really kind to me and helped me get my foot in the door, get started with it. So I started doing, as I was working for my other companies, I was also ramping up my talks and thinking what I wanted to talk about. Then I got all involved in particular architecture, and then that happened to be, and still is, pretty hot at the moment. So that just launched me into that full time. That's how I got to, that's how I got the background.
Yeah. So, all right. So I'm going to ask you the one question I did have planned, because it maybe it's a good transition. So what is teaching?
Yeah, that's good. Boy, that's a big one, because it reminds me of how much I wanted others to teach me when I was younger. So to me, it's teaching, almost helping me talk back to the person I was in my journey, and saying, when I was then, I would have loved to have X that's now available today. So for me, I love being able to share what I know from my experiences, and hopefully some people will not, travel down some of the same paths that I went down. So it's about giving back experience. The other aspect of it, though, is I get a lot back from it. It's not a one-way, channel. I get different perspectives, different ways of thinking, and things that challenge me, which that's all part of the journey, right? So I went to a school. It was like live to learn to live was the motto,
Right.
and that always sticks with me. Learn to live to learn. It always sticks with me, and I think that's part of what really makes it real for me. When I get to those aha moments when I'm teaching, and then somebody gets it, and then there's a connection between that individual and me, I'm like, cool. That's makes me happy.
Right.
It makes them happy too. So it's all about happiness, right?
There you go. So I've been teaching formally for about 20 years, a little over maybe. I've always done kind of corporate education work, but that's a little bit of a different thing. Has a different kind of outcome orientation, though I think the approach is similar in many ways. The piece that you said about kind of providing a human being at a stage of journey that you have enough distance on to have perspective and can provide some insight on, not answers, because everybody's got their own journey, but you can provide some perspective. Like, I find a lot of the time I spend in developmental spaces with, quote unquote, young people. And of course, each passing year, there are more and more people I have to call young people, because, it's very frustrating. No, so much of what I think I actually provide is not inside the container, right? So it's not the content, although hopefully, provide good content, good tools and et cetera. But it's the perspective on the frame they're operating out of, the reality they're operating out of, is going to drop away. It's like, this is reality now, and you're making decisions, but the reality is that there is no fixed reality. That and so the inherent pressures that come with this reality eventually will shift. The inherent pleasures of the current reality will eventually shift, right? So enjoy the pleasures of this reality, because you're going to lose them. Sure. Ease up on the pressures of this reality, because they're going to go away, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah.
But what's interesting is the patterns are the same.
Yeah.
So you can always be teaching about or talking about something, and it's in the moment of some kind of a thing to learn, some kind of a stress, some bad practices, some whatever it may be, bad habits. But you can always go a step out from that and say, this is a pattern that happens all the time. Right. And have examples of those. And those are always interesting too. Software architecture is always doing that too. So we always talk about patterns and anti-patterns and new technologies, but it's the same crap's new day, because it's the same patterns. Yeah. So software architecture. Yeah. So with the digital living rooms and gazebos. Right. No, it's about constructing. It's you talk about. There's a term of. There's terms out there in the computer science. There's computer science. Yeah. I'm a programmer. Mm-hmm. I'm a developer. Right. right? And then there's, well, I'm a software engineer,
Right.
and I'm a software architect.
Mm-hmm.
Those are, a lot of that is I negatively, I look at it as people's way of putting buzzwords on resumes to
Right.
beef up their dollars by slapping labels on there like engineer and architect and things like that, rather than saying, well, look, I develop software.
Right.
That's at the core of it. I develop software, and I've always done that and always will. Right.
Right.
So the question is, what do those terms mean? But if you look back at building architecture versus a building engineer, right, versus somebody who's in the science of materials, maybe it's the same type of analogy. You think about those different roles. Engineers are making decisions; they're weighing practicality of reality against the limited resources against what they want to do. It's like, I want to do this, but these are the parameters I have to deal with. That's an engineer's life, making those decisions. Architects are more about designing and saying, this is what I want. I don't know how we can quite do it. A lot of the engineers are going to help me do that. But this is where we want to go. It's maybe a vision maker in that sense. And but it's in the software world, there's a very gray line between software engineering, software architecture in terms of those two terms. Because you have to be, there are other people say, well, I'm an architect, but I'm hands-on architect.
Right.
I'm not aloof. There's the title of like ivory tower architect, somebody who's out of touch with the rest, who is just dreaming and doesn't really understand the compromises that everybody has to make.
Yeah. So I get, the lines are gray, kind of where one ends and one begins, right? Architect, engineer. What are contexts in which there are hard lines? Like what are the kinds of applications or industries or are there any where there's a value in having a hard line between, architecture and engineering?
Boy, outside of software engineering, it's
within software, right? So I'm thinking of software engineering, software architecture. Are there applications, industries, contexts where it's really useful to have them separated?
It's interesting. I'll give you a thought process here, and it has to do with people and organizations and the way they communicate.
Yeah.
There's a idea in software engineering about having these teams. And often what happens is you organize your teams to be based upon what they know, right? Technically what they know. So you have a UI team. People who are really good at writing the front end web stuff, how it looks and how it behaves. And then you also have people that are database. All they know is data, and they know how to store data. You might even have security experts, and all they know is security, how to prevent hacks. In between those, you have like software developers who are writing the code. So within, when you're architecting these applications, you have these groups of people with technical savvy in different areas. And they all tend to talk to each other and communicate with each other. So you have these hard lines. Almost, you create these social groups. Like the JavaScript engineers, right? Or the database engineers, or the AWS experts, Amazon experts.
Right.
What's an interesting architecture that I deal with all the time is trying to break down those barriers, because as soon as you have these groups, you could even call them cliques. It's a natural tendency in human behavior to have, to be part of your tribe. But it's sometimes not helpful for a company or for a thing you want to do. From those, think that you are maybe like CVS or a drug company or Walgreens or something like that wants to break into the idea of delivering drugs using drones. Deliver them on the doorstep. So how would you create an application that would, do all that? How do you get all those people together to have a delivery of a business? So that drone delivery is a business unit of a larger company. If you just bring in drone experts and then you have like, software experts and drone experts and drug packaging experts, and they're all working in their cliques and silos, but they're not working on what does the customer want? The customer wants to wake up in the morning and get their drug on the doorstep.
Right.
If all those different cliques are not working as a group to do the drug delivery application, and instead they're working on the drone application or the drug packaging application and whatever the application to make that up, that's the battle that a lot of companies have to battle, and saying, how can we take experts from the drone, from the drug packaging? How do we take these individuals and then make them a group, make them a clique? Because if you make that a clique or a communication group, you'll be more successful at that initiative, whatever that is. And drone, that's just an example. It could be anything. Right? It's an interesting mindset, and it's actually a mindset comes from, it's not my idea. It's Melvin Conway back in the 1930s, I'm guessing. I forget when it was, but he came up with the idea is that the way you communicate defines your architecture.
Right.
It's not the other way around. You shouldn't let the technologies and the cliques of groups in the technologies define how you do things. It's really, if you want to be successful at a particular architecture, form that team first, make up that team, and then go forward. Maybe you want to think of that as being like the cabinet for the presidency, right? Create the great cabinet with all these different experts, and then go forward with that communication team, with that team that all communicates together, but they're going forward with a particular purpose in mind. Yeah. Who's the architect there? Probably the president in that sense. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. I mean, there's a lot of parallel between everything you just said and some of the core principles around how we develop, organizational executives and organizational members in general to work on things that don't have precedent to them. We used to call them breakthrough, but disruption, innovation, any of the hook terms. This notion of bringing together eclectic teams with deep expertise in a variety of different domains, but then setting up loose roles between and among them, and let the architecture emerge. And so someone tends to take point on it, but let the architecture for the breakthrough emerge through the kind of committed interactions and conversations of that group of people.
That's right, and you're pointing on something also important too, is that the architecture emerges from the people.
Yeah,
because we all have that in our blood. We just our social needs are to work with others,
right,
and to mix that, and the greater sum is bigger than the units, putting it together.
And it's the complete opposite of most of how we've been taught to do things. Most of how traditional organizations are designed. God knows how education is designed. It is a very prescriptive approach and a very kind of hard boundary role approach to things. And in my experience, that's fine for things that have well-defined maps. Right, we already know the destination in advance, and it's a linear path to get there.
Yes,
that kind of thing can work fine, but for anything interesting,
anything creative, if you're following a recipe, that's pretty well known. Yep. But anytime you're creating something new, or forging on some journey, businesses do it all the time, but we do it all the time too in our personal lives.
So tell me about those. So you didn't start out teaching, obviously. You started out doing the work.
Yeah.
So how does that transition happen for you? Like when do you start teaching the thing that you've been doing?
Yeah, where does that start happening? yeah, it's, boy, when I don't know, it's just started happening. It started making me happy. For me, some of it clicked with some wonderful younger software engineers. I think part of it happens when people you realize can do the same thing you can do, and they're a lot younger. But you see some mistakes that they're making. Right. I think it just kind of kicks in naturally, right? It's part of being a parent as well. It's like suddenly you have a child and you're like, oh, here are some things I need to teach you.
Right.
It's along the same lines. It's like, it's not like yes, you seek out to be a parent, but it's once you become a parent and that first day happens, you're like, oh, my role has just shifted here and I need to start teaching, and it just happens naturally, I think, in that sense. So I think as you get older and you have younger people to work with, it happens. I started working with interns, and that's a particular joy for me, is to see their brilliance and their potential, but also see their gaps, which are wonderful. In a sense, it's almost it's almost like wishful. It's wishful thinking. It's like, oh, now you don't have to make the same mistakes I made. Of course, they're going to make mistakes. They're going to make all other mistakes, of course. But at least you can help along a little bit, and that's what a great gift to give.
Yeah. So my experience, though, is that so many folks who are really gifted in an area, right? They can do the thing. Have difficulty translating it into teaching, into kind of cultivating that in others. So have you found that, or I mean, not for yourself, but in general, is that your experience? I mean, obviously, if you're doing all these classes around the world. By the way, just the wonder of technology. So my 76-year-old mother, pinged me and said, "That's the Sun Temple. It's within a few miles of where most of our family is in India. So that's near Ahmedabad apparently, and then very close to a lot of my family."
Well, best to your mom. That's awesome.
Yeah. So.
The Sun Temple, yes.
Yeah, so no, obviously you're going to India and Iowa to teach, so obviously you have some competence in it. But my experience is that a lot of folks who are very good at a thing don't make the transition well to developing others in it. What's your experience with that?
You're teasing something else that I forgot to mention. Yes, and it's something that. I started teaching, no fluff, just stuff, and I started doing presentations, and I started getting in front of people, which a lot of people are just like they can't do, and, it still makes me nervous sometimes. Sure. But I was like, I'm a year and a half into it, and I was like, why do I love doing this? There's something that happens actually when you're teaching, especially if you're teaching about an exciting product or exciting thing that you love to do. There's actually adrenaline that happens. Right? It's not like jumping out of an airplane adrenaline high, right. But there is an adrenaline to it where you get up, you do it, you process it, you get excited, you're passionate about it, and then actually afterwards there's an adrenaline crash. Often I'll take a big nap afterwards or go have a quiet beer with somebody. There's that curve, and when I started recognizing that, I realized that that adrenaline I already had it in my system. When I was in school in New Orleans, I took some acting class. I took a semester off, and I was living downtown New Orleans, and I got really into method acting. There was a fellow downtown that, and the group I got friendly with, and he had been taught by Strasberg, the method guru. So he was like second tier of knowing the method, and he taught these workshops in the evening. So I started taking it over, and then so we wound up doing a couple plays, and then we also did the Tennessee Williams Festival. I was in the Rose Tattoo, a lot of fun, right? Good. Take a break from what I was doing, do something different, re-scramble my brain a little bit, and challenge myself, because I also knew that I was not good in front of people and speaking and those kind of things. And I kind of knew I didn't want that for my career for some reason. I don't know why, but it was let me work on that. So I got the acting bug, and After college, I didn't do any more acting. It wasn't there. But I realized that adrenaline rush was the same. And my body was craving it, I guess. That's my theory. So I'm one of those people where I can easily transition and start talking to a group full of people now, where it wasn't like that before. And I think that just came from, me pushing myself through some of the acting. And I guess actually going back to elementary school or middle school, I had done some acting there. And I also had some very good acting teachers. Where do you get started with things like this? Education is really important. The arts in school is really important. I probably wouldn't be doing what I'm doing if it wasn't for the arts in school. Right. I know there's always these budget cuts for arts, but
So when you're designing these, all stuff, no fluff?
Good, almost, yeah. No fluff, no fluff, just stuff.
Just stuff. Sorry about that.
NFJS, yeah.
NFJ, all right, no fluff, just stuff. So when you're designing these kind of programs, how do you? Again, one of the things that Expert, it was listening. Like, I'm really good at I'm really good at baking. My daughter's a baker. She's actually amazing, right? So I'm really good at baking. I can't imagine my daughter teaching anybody to bake though. Because just her current temperament. She's an artist with the thing, right? Like, you can't be in the kitchen. So, that's one version of it. Another is, I'm an expert. And so when I'm working with somebody, like, I want to put everything in because it's all important. So lots of blockages people can have. So when you're designing a program, what's the mechanism? How do you filter of everything I know how to do really well on this topic? How do I, kind of calibrate what goes in here?
Oh, the program in terms of like what I'm teaching. I always have to think about who's coming to this, and where are they coming from. I do try to get to know the audience and who I'm talking to.
Right.
And I think back about when I had to learn it. What would my stumbling blocks? In other words, if it's baking, it's like, why do I have to cream the sugar with the butter first? Why is that so important?
Right.
That's a huge thing for baking. But if you're just a teenager making cookies, you just want to make the cookies and you're not thinking about chemistry and the physics of the dough. But to get that next level, you have to slow down and you have to explain it to people and say, look, this is what's going on here. So that's what I try to do with a lot of my talks is I try to think about where the core of the 90 minutes, 3 hours, how many hours I'm teaching it. I think about the core lesson and I actually call it the aha moment. And I'm trying to get everybody to that, like all the things that are important. Like, I know you haven't been listening to me before and I know you're not listening to me afterwards, but right now you got to listen to this. This is the core of it. You got to cream the butter and the sugar or whatever it is. And I think that what's really important is to take the perspective, which is hard for a lot of people, is step out and go, why was this hard for me? And it's probably going to just be hard for you too.
Right.
Or at least 80% of you. Right. It's finding that. The other way to find that is feedback. When people come back up to me and say, yeah, I really got that. Or you don't understand what you said. Huge. So, and you always do tuning of how you deliver stuff that way, not just normal. And that's any art or craft or skill.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so it gets back to, a theme from earlier in the conversation, right? When we were talking about working with young folks and being able to kind of, be outside their perspective, but know their perspective. I hear you saying a similar thing here where, so then, so if we came to a no fluff, just stuff, I got it right that time, right? Session. What kind of things are you working on with people?
Oh, okay. I'm working on what's very popular right now is if you want to get a little technical here, this is very high level. It's cloud native computing. They call it cloud computing, right? So if I want to develop applications and run them on Amazon or Google or IBM servers, there's lots of servers out there. How do I do that? A lot of developers are comfortable with writing applications.
Right.
I'm going to write an application, work it, run it on my laptop, maybe present a little UI, and it works. And the question is, how do I take that exact same thing and then put it on a server somewhere else and then have it scale massively across multiple servers in this large data center? How does that all work? And it's literally going from single computer applications to, it's called distributed computing.
Right.
And traditionally, distributed computing has been really, really hard. But there's great new technologies that I didn't have 20, 40 years ago,
right,
that are so cool that make it what used to be really hard much more approachable for a larger amount of developers. So when you start having that, you start having a lot of developers going, how do I do this? That sounds, I can do this now. How do I start doing it? How do I get a job doing this? How do I get a career going with this? And that's the joy, to be able to say, I understand it's hard. I understand it's big, but let's pick it apart a little bit and find the patterns that you're already used to and show you that it's not that bad. The way I explain it to a lot of developers is, so I teach a thing called Kubernetes. So operating, so it's a way to help you do distributed computing that's really complex on these large systems. And it's a tool set that makes it somewhat more understandable, right? There's still a lot to learn there. But what I do, one of the aha moments I do for people is saying, look, when you're a developer, the first thing you have to learn is, like, you open your laptop and what's presented in front of you. There's this thing called an operating system. When you turn on your phone, your iPhone, your Android phone, that phone uses an operating system. And without realizing, you quickly are learning how to launch applications, how to go to settings, how to enable the network, Wi-Fi. If it's on a laptop, you can actually go to the command line, or you can launch applications on the desktop using icons, or you can go to the command line. Oh, there's a file system. I can store files. So that whole learning process of learning what an operating system is the exact same thing as learning Kubernetes. It just happens to be an operating system that runs in a massive data center, but it's still the same mental process. So I calm people down saying, look, you learn you learn operating systems all the time, your phones and your laptops. This is no different. So relax and let's get to it. And then people are like, oh, okay, cool. A lot of it is anxiety, right? That's part of learning, is anxiety gets in the way of people too. Too much. I don't have the time.
Yeah, absolutely. It can feel overwhelming, and all sorts of other things that become blockages. So let take that theme and just shift it a little bit. One of the things we run into in general is, particularly with much younger folks, we've started running some programs for high school kids, kind of free programs to just give them access to emerging technology, stuff they should be getting anyway. But
Agreed.
The kind of notion of going into tech as a career in general is a blind spot for folks, right? So here you're talking about, you studied method acting for a while, and you clearly are, very much, people oriented, very comfortable with communication. Not necessarily the profile is not. If I asked somebody who is outside of tech and had no, kind of view of tech, you're not the profile they would give me, right?
Except middle-aged white guy.
Fair enough. That part, You get the gender and the
which we're trying to break in the industry, of course.
Yeah. Well, that's the whole thing we're up to here, But in terms of personality, and the reality is,
I know what you mean. The geeky, the nerdy, the introverted type of personality. Absolutely. There are people that are good communicators that are also introverted, right? So I would say one of the reasons I wanted to study acting is because I was like that.
Right.
So maybe I'd buck the shell a little bit. So, and also that's also a misconception, is that in order to be successful, you have to be outgoing, right?
That's right.
That's not right either, too.
That's right. Yeah, and I think there are a lot more folks in tech like you than people imagine, right? That it is not the kind of nerdy, sit at your computer for 18 hours a day sort of thing, right? It's like any other profession. There's a pretty broad, it's a continuum of personality types and styles, and not enough of a continuum of gender and racial diversity, but certainly personality. So what I'm going to get to though is what's your sense, given the kind of unique experience you've had, what's your sense for how we communicate better what a career in tech is actually about, and who can succeed, and who it's for?
Yeah, and it's, the problem with people who think about tech is that in order to be really successful, you have to be you have to be a deep diver into the tech, right? And that's not necessarily true. I mean, you can think about like biomedicine,
Right.
DNA. If you're really into DNA and chemistry of DNA, you can be really good at that, but it's only going to take you so far. You really have to have all of those other skills. You don't have to be an expert in everything, but I just think success comes from expanding out beyond just hyper focusing on the tech or whatever. And it doesn't have to be software tech. It's, any type of tech, any kind of a skill. If you get too far into it, you're doing injustice to your soul, right? Because we're all human, and there's so much more to all of us than those interesting things. And I was going to use the word small, and that's not the right word, because if you're really into something and you really want to do a deep dive into it, it's never small. It can be quite big. The study of bugs, like you can get really into the study of bugs,
Right.
But there's more to it than that. So it's about, and part of that is sharing, right? If you spend all that time diving into something, would be an injustice for you to, leave the earth with all that knowledge. Share it, share it with your community, and do it. So you have to. It's not for yourself; it's for all of us. Get good at what you do, and then share it.
Yeah. So I'm curious. You mentioned acting, so put that one aside because you told us about it. What was formative for you? Where would you point to in terms of what formed your philosophy and approach to things? Were there experiences, books, teachers? What was formative?
Wow. Yeah. It's, I feel like I have it somewhere, and it's not coming out. There are life experiences, and it's been. What comes back in my mind is teachers along the route. Talk about experts who were giving back.
Right.
I think teachers are always there, and then there's particular mentors that are in your life that also eke that out of you.
Sure.
The mentor doesn't come without you, right? So there's mentors around us everywhere, but we're not tapping into those mentors because we don't have an interest in what they know. It's when there's a need for learning, for growth, or for an interest, and there's a mentor that looks the other way and says, yeah, I see it in you. And you say, yes, this is where I want to be.
Right.
And there's been significant points in my life where that's happened. With my acting coach, there's a fellow by the name of Herb Graham, he was the reason why my family, when I was 4, moved from Pittsburgh to Connecticut.
Okay.
And he worked with my dad. And he was a family friend, and my dad had worked with him for a long time. He was up on State Street, like just a mile north of District.
Okay.
And my dad worked there for, I don't know, 20, 30 years. And out of high school, he brought a computer home. My future boss, Herb Graham, brought a computer into the house. And it was at the moment I was like, I really want to learn how to program this. I want to play with this. I want to write some games. And he was a person from coming from, he was an engineer, worked at Baird, and went to MIT, and smart guy. And he looked at me the other direction going, there's a spark here.
Yeah.
And I was like, I really want to do this. So I wound up working for him for 10 years. And he taught me everything about entrepreneurship, drive, writing software. He taught me about failure.
Yeah.
Many things. He passed away 2 years ago. Lived out in Madison. Great guy. Turns out he was actually he was the jury lead for the remember the Cheshire Killings?
Oh, I do. Wow.
Yeah, he was the jury lead for it, and yeah, it's an awful story, but it's a wonderful fellow.
There's the old adage of when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. I found that it works both ways, and I'm hearing you speak to it. I also think it's the case that when the teacher is ready, the students will appear. Right? There is a certain readiness on the part of teacher to really authentically take on some kind of mentoring developmental role. And until you're really ready to kind of give of yourself that way, actual students, people may show up and want to consume kind of knowledge, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the kind of relationship you had with this gentleman, right? There's a certain readiness on his part that had to be present for you to even show up as a mentee.
Yes. Yeah. And the stars have to align right, but when they do, it's that's where this magic happens with a lot of people's careers. That could be true for a nurse. I know my niece got involved and she wanted to be a doctor, and she wound up driving an ambulance and got really into the ER aspect of ambulances and the hospital. And I know I'm sure, I haven't asked her yet, but I'm sure there was somebody along the way who said, hey, you want to get in the ambulance with me? Right. And that took her down a slightly different path.
Right.
What she was like, I want to go to med school. And she went to a slightly different path. She's actually going to go to Yale nursing school. She just got accepted. So, whatever it is, there's points in our lives. We actually, as learners we have to move, as we're moving forward in our lives, we also have to always keep watch out for these people. So if you're interested in something, you have to find those mentors. It's hard to find. They're rare, I think. I think they're a rare breed.
And to your point, though, there has to be a willingness to go find them. Maybe just as rare, folks who are really willing to put themselves out there to ask for a mentor in a way that's authentic and really invite somebody to make a serious commitment to you. Sometimes it's a product of the way we've designed a certain part of our society where the bias is towards the transaction. And so, how I ask becomes transactional, or how I offer as a mentor becomes transactional. And then that short circuits the kind of relationship you're pointing to,
Exactly. Right. The best one that comes naturally.
Yeah.
Or it's not asked. It's just almost implied.
Yep.
Without being it's implied without expectations.
Right. So what, from the vantage point of having, been at the thing for some time and having what certainly sounds like a very healthy perspective on career and relationships, professional relationships, at least. We haven't gotten into the personal side, but, what advice would you give to a 22-year-old kind of fresh out of a program like ours or fresh out of, undergrad, going into some tech or tech adjacent field now in 2021? What would you tell them?
Balance depth of understanding with breadth, and recognize the fact that you should always be balancing them in your career. it's one thing to be imposter syndrome. Right? If you are new at something, there's a tendency to really say, I have to know this. So you have to really study. I am going to read the dictionary in order to be an expert at the English language, right? So you start with A and try to get through it. We never do. So that would be a deep dive. Go wide when you can, and wider is not always as wide as you think it. You may think you're going wide, but challenge yourself to go one more step.
Yeah.
And that part of that is networking with the people around you and reaching out and listening to them, especially the ones that have out there a little more experience. Listen to them and you're going to learn and make those relationships, connections. That's how you go wide, is by looking at different people's perspectives, because we all have different lenses and goggles. So see the world through everybody. Try to see the world through their eyes, and you'll have a much better understanding about how to go forward. If you just do deep dive focus and you're not worrying about everybody else, or everybody else is an idiot or something like that, you're missing out. So definitely, talk to the people around you and get those perspectives.
Yeah, that's good. Well, we're going to edit. Sometimes we edit clips out of these things. We're going to edit this last section out from here and connect it to the one we did with Ben Heller last week, because he closed on like almost exactly the same territory. He had a different take on it, but the exact same territory. So
I did not watch it. So
no, it's spectacular. I mean, the two thoughts could just fit so nicely together as Lego pieces. So I think we definitely are going to splice those two together and make 1 3-minute clip that would be really amazing. And I'm with you.
Something salvageable from my diatribe. All right.
So I had a client early in my career.
Yeah.
Who said, the senior person, a very senior person in pharma, in finance, and just through all my career is blind luck. Through blind luck, I'm like advising this woman, more than twice my age in a Fortune 50 company. And we've been working together for several months at this point, probably 6 months. Off and on, and we're renewing a contract. It actually must have been 6 months, because back then I used to do 6-month contracts, and I was renew the contract. And she's like, yeah, fine. She said, let me give you some advice, and it's gonna be kind of completely contrary to what I should be doing as a client, but I can afford to do it. Said, listen, the thing you work on, you're really good at, but most conversations you're worth like $100 an hour. And every now and again, you're worth like $1 million an hour. So in the aggregate, you got to up your rates. And I was like, holy, and that became a philosophy for me, like how to justify high rates, because she was right, damn it. There are hours where I'm $1 million, right? And so charging an aggregate. But my point in saying that is to bring it back to this. This is why I like conversations. Like if you pop into a good, meaningful conversation at any given point, it might be worth $2.
Right.
But if it's actual human conversation, there are going to be moments that are $1 million moments.
Yeah.
Right. Versus if you do a scripted thing, the whole thing's going to be a good, even, $150 value kind of
melodrama. Yeah.
Yeah. It'll be valuable, but it'll never spike up and down. It'll just be this value, and good value, good solid value. But actual kind of unplanned, organic conversation that's got some commitment to it, it'll spike both ways. And when it gets up here, it's like, oh my God. That last kind of 3 minutes for me is like, oh damn, that's great.
Cool.
Yeah. I mean, not that other parts weren't, but because I think it's such critical advice for young people. We get so myopic, and specialization is necessary for a variety of reasons, but it's the death of growth, particularly early in your life. It is the absolute death of growth.
Yeah. Value of diversity.
Yeah. And you don't, 22, 23, 28, you have no clue who you are yet. I mean, there's, it's good to specialize to an extent, but broadening out experiences, social circles, cuisine you eat, like everything, broadening out so you can kind of get a sense.
Yeah. The more Yeah, the more you explore, the more corners you can turn,
Yeah.
to make those different life changes in your life. If you're just doing one thing, you're not going to be turning that much.
Yeah.
With the bigger your field, there's more places to turn and move toward. That'll help you bring you to a better place.
That's awesome.
Not that everybody's in a bad place.
No, but better. It's not good or bad, but better. You can get better. Wherever you are, there can be better. There can be,
Exactly.
more expansive. Yeah.
Without having to do reincarnation, right? It's like right now, how do we do something right now in this window?
Listen, I was born in India. I am a Hindu, so yeah, we get we get the multi-day pass at the amusement park. You know what I mean? So if we don't hit all the rides today, we're coming back. We can hit some of the other ones tomorrow, as it were.
Right.
Yeah.
Playing life with the video game where you get more life points, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's it. This is great, man.
Oh, it was a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, this is amazing. I really appreciate you taking the time. Just thank you. And I'm sure we'll be seeing you again. And for those of you watching now, or we tend to get more people watching kind of after the fact. If you're watching, we got a whole bank of these and new ones every week. So kind of tune in. Yeah, tune in and listen in on conversations. Thank you again, Jonathan. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. Have a good night.
Take care.
Okay.